Well, welcome everybody. Some of you, I'm not going to look at everybody's name. Some of you may know me from years past. Some of you I'm new to, and some of you don't know me at all. So welcome, and I thank Kathy and Bridget for allowing me to share a little bit about my business as a kinesiotherapist. I won't bore you with the whole 30 years of my my journey through 1989 up till now, but how I started is I was a one-dimensional fitness person. I went as a college student in cardiac care as an athletic trainer, and went to Chicago and thought that's what I was going to do. Clearly, I was working for the Chicago Bulls, and well, I really wasn't working as a Chicago Bulls therapist. I was the water girl. So I lasted about 2 weeks and realized I need to find something else. So that led me into more of, really what I wanted to do. And I wanted to take care of patients. I wanted to take care of people, which was a life skills specialist in Chicago, working with individuals with metabolic injuries. Cocaine addiction was my specialty, and then aquatic therapy. So I'm going fast. And then I met somebody in Chicago who was a kinesiotherapist. And I loved that they were holistic in nature, that they worked with many different patients. They worked in hospital, they worked in private sector, they worked as an independent contractor, but I loved that they were holistic in nature. I'm just going to use that word right now just as an umbrella term, because I didn't even know what that really meant in terms of the multidisciplinary paraprofessionals that were there. I had no idea that I can work with an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a physician, a personal trainer, an aquatic therapist, all that in one, benefiting a single client to their rehabilitative needs. So thanks to Bridget, she's the one that really came up with this title. And it is about the patient care, period, foremost. That's what is my focus and always has been, is we need to look at the patient as a whole and not a part approach. So with my education in somatics and Pilates was a means to enhance the rehabilitative outcomes. And when we talk about rehabilitation, it is my files are not working. Sorry, there we go. The rehabilitative needs, I want to address that because I know there's an issue with, are we therapists or post-rehabilitative therapists? We can kind of table that for now, but I'm going to use those two words interchangeably. So today we're going to touch upon my model at body-centric and how it is holistic in nature, and all the different modalities, dimensions that I use, my exercise physiology background, my training in somatic education, my full education as a comprehensive Pilates teacher, my master's in transpersonal psychotherapy, of course, my kinesiotherapy, as a practitioner since 1991, I believe. Maybe I'm incorrect in that. Maybe it's a little bit after that. So all of these are my interdisciplinary approach to healing. So with that became body-centric. My LLC has been formed in 1991 with just that one dimension of fitness. I was a cardiac specialist at Coors and Coors Wellness Center in Boulder, where I'm from. And then I was teaching classes just for extra income. 22 years of age, really excited about the whole wellness, becoming a certified cancer or cardiac specialist, et cetera. And then moved to Chicago, still in the same fitness mode. There was something missing. I was definitely happy with my clientele, started Fitness West, and was successful in my own right, and just felt like there was something missing. My clients I was becoming it was like a treadmill. I was not happy to necessarily get up in the morning. It was just one after the other, another dumbbell lift, another gait walk, another sit up, get on the treadmill, et cetera, et cetera. And it just came to me. Kathy asked me how KT, I know how it came. I was working in Chicago and I was teaching water exercise, and somebody was a kinesiotherapist. That's how that happened. I just remember that. So anyway, that background brought me about 15, 17 years later to creating body centric. I already was working as a kinesiotherapist in Chicago. And then I moved back to Colorado, still working as a kinesiotherapist and seeing a lot of clients, mostly private and mostly in mostly in the health club areas. So I was utilizing my exercise physiology, working in tandem with my kinesiotherapy understanding. And then what brought me into more expansive modalities was to become certified as a comprehensive Pilates instructor. We'll get into all of these dimensions and modalities throughout the talk. And then I became interested in somatics. So somatics, if any of you are familiar, is more just re-educating the neuromuscular bodies, and soma meaning body, and we work with rest and movement in our practices. So a little bit like PNF, awareness, meditation, but again, that is a whole different presentations about somatics. So where somatics really lit me on fire took me to the path of my master's and becoming a transpersonal psychotherapist. It's a contemplative Buddhist university in Boulder, Europa. So this is what I work as a kinesiotherapist. I hang my hat in my studio as a kinesiotherapist, but I pull from my knowledge of exercise physiology, cardiac. I use Pilates as a modality, but also the principles. And you'll see where these all tie in. Somatics is the little quiet, the little person on your shoulder that's teaching them about somatics and about body awareness. And then the transpersonal psychotherapy, more is the wellness counseling one-on-one. However, I interject those principles, the knowledge base into my clients for the goal of the patient is wellness, holistic being. So you've heard holism used in many different models. So my holistic model is a life approach. It's about wellness. It's about well-being, mind, body, spirit. And I use that spirit lightly right now. Again, it's in a whole nother umbrella, a whole nother subject to talk about. So it's really about the unification of mind and body, or not necessarily unification, but the awareness that it's never a disconnect. There's no definitive separation, never. And I believe in a lot of our practitioners, myself included, didn't believe in it, was very scientific minded, very much a didactic scientist. I'm going to stay down that path, stay down that road. The whole mind body was ethereal, little woo woo, little voodoo, didn't really understand it, really didn't care to. And that's very honest of me to say that. I just really didn't put that together until something it happened with a couple of my clients. And there was a huge aha moment. So that's where I look at my clients. When you walk in my studio, they come in for, like all of us, they come in either for a knee injury, an ankle injury. Some of them have paraplegic, some are quadriplegic, some have had cancer, different bearings, some have metabolic diseases, some have, syndrome X. They have all of those, obesity, high cholesterol, and they, broke their kneecap, et cetera. So they come in and I'm post-rehabilitative, right? They come in to see me to, again, get fixed, get healed. And I try to put that off in my mind that I'm not here to fix. Let's see what's going on. And that's what I look at. And the holism is to address the maladaptive patterns. And I'll give some examples. So if somebody comes in and they're very punched over, right? They're very kyphotic, maybe Dowager's hump, maybe not. So in my training, I know I have the skills, the tools to say, all right, maybe that's not their stance all the time. Maybe it's just kind of the white coat syndrome. They're coming in here and thinking, oh, I don't know what this is all about. My studio looks a little intimidating with all the towers and the reformers. It looks a little intimidating. So that I usually think, okay, well, I see some of these holding patterns, but then we start to address their need, let's just say the kyphosis, and then we start asking questions. and looking at patterns, that for them, they maybe not know that they have these holding patterns, because we live in a world that is very mechanistic, and we have what is more sensory amnesia, we'll get into later, is we don't know how our bodies are really moving. And we become in these patterns, and we get held in these patterns of this kyphosis, right? And our breathing didn't stop, but our breathing is hindered. Our back begins to hurt, right? Lower back, we start getting a shuffled pattern of gait, then we might fall and then something happens. But that's where we start going back in history and looking at these maladaptive patterns, and then working with them in a dynamic way, right? So I'm going to go back to this case study about kyphosis here in a minute. So I really do, each client has to go through these voluntary movements with me. And I mean, again, can they stand up straight? Can they hold their arms over their head and look right and left? And so we're doing an assessment without being so, checklist, right? Is that arm 180 degrees? Is it 45 degrees? It's more of this kind of playful, which I use is a pattern of playfulness. And it allows them, I get to see them in a personality way of, oh, this is what their normal patterns are. Because if we all know, if somebody is staring at you and asking you questions, it's a little bit different than when you're at a family, function, or, at a social event, you're going to be a little bit different, more relaxed. So that's what I look at, and to see what kind of tags, TAG, what kind of patterns do they have. And then I start asking them to go into their movement patterns and ask them, what do you perceive? Is that do you feel comfortable in that? Do you feel that that is a perfect stance for you, a perfect posture? What sensations do you feel? Do you feel anything? Does it hurt? Can you move right to left, etc.? So it's more about putting them in the role, the game. So it's a dance, it's a tango of, I'm going to help you, you're going to help me, we're going to help you get to be your best being. And that has worked out well for me, because then they have a card in the game. It's not just me saying, well, this is what you need to do. Go home with your 5 sheets of paper and do these 900 exercises, because you've seen them. We give them 25 exercises, and it's like reading Chinese for half of them, right? So I tend to come back and say, I'll give you maybe 1 exercise to go home for retention, and we'll get back into that. So the somatic education, and let me stop real quick. I don't read my presentation. You can go back and look at it. So I'm paraphrasing and adding to, so just if I'm going too fast, let me know. I'm more than happy to slow down. So the somatics, as I said, is the neuro education or mind-body training. And somatics is just a different way of looking at a movement. For example, somebody that has a lot of, let's say, dystonia of the neck. I have a client because of radiation from breast cancer. So she has really weak neck. She shakes a little bit, very hypertrophic on one side and flaccid on the other. Can't hold her head up in all fours. So what we say is, okay, we start doing other patterns of movement. Well, for her, it's more about, can you turn your head to the right, bring your hand to the left, turn your eyes to your right and left. It's a neurological pattern, and not to go through the whole, neurological patterns, but we know D1, we know D2. We forget in somatics, we teach how we come out of the womb. The first neurological pattern is, right, it's the pulling out, this pattern of just being thrusted. And then the second pattern is more like a worm, right? Third pattern, we start to crawl. Fourth pattern, we're walking bipedal. Some people, they've arrested that, where you pulled out of the womb with forceps. Did you start from wiggling like a little worm to just standing and running? These are all developmental patterns, neurological patterns that we want to have. Sometimes they become arrested because of an injury, because of some kind of stressor. It could be psychological stress. It could become emotional stress. It could become, like I said, an accident, an injury, or a variety of all of that, unfortunately. So we somatic education goes through different neurological patternings with rest and then movement in very slow processes. We can do this movement for an hour in different variations and different angles. Pardon me? Okay, so somatic is trying to gain both awareness, sensation, and motor control of all the muscles that we're working with. And there is an educational process, because most of my clients that they come to, I don't say we're doing somatics. We just say we're doing these exercises and we need to slow down and then ask them again, what are they perceiving? What is their sensations? And then going into the action again. So it's work. And that's, I say, the 4-letter work. So this is a typical movement pattern for understanding the pattern of release in the upper body and in the neck, and the contralateral pattern, right, of walking. And most of times you see people that walk with their hands stiff to their legs, right? And they kind of walk in this bipedal motion. They're not using their arms and swinging, maybe because of a injury, maybe they're compensating. Possibly they never learned how to swing their arms, which is common that I see. So this is one, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So again, I'm reiterating, but it really, we can stay in this perception bubble for a long time, is to have people stand. For example, my client, who is very kyphotic, only when she forgets. She's a yoga teacher. She comes to me for the last 6 years, and she's not that way except when she gets in the water and talks with all her friends, and then she gets back into the cycle. So it is about sensory amnesia. And that is where awareness, kinesthetic awareness, awareness to your surroundings, of why is she coming into that? And that goes into more of the psychological aspect of, why is this what we call guarding or tagline? But it has an enormous dimension in their healing. So we can stay in the perception, we can stay in the sensation. And obviously, we don't want to stay in this action too long if we have not already healed or transformed, right? If they're not changing their shape, or we're not moving forward into a positive continuum, right? So this is not mine, by the way. This is the spa cycle is a trademark of somatics, Hannah Somatics. Okay, so we're not going to necessarily, I'm not going to read through all this, but every muscle is innervated, right? So we're trying to work on the central nervous system. We're not just looking at the muscle, which we tend to do, right? We want to stretch, we want to strengthen, we want to do muscle endurance, we want to do muscle strength. And we want to put that in as kinesiotherapists. That's why I love us, is we look at all the compensatory issues related to that part, right? So again, kinesiotherapy is about this inclusion and this integration of all the all the multi dimensions. And yeah, some of us get stuck in just one part, rather, driving, or you're just ambulation, or you're just aqua. And I get it. However, hopefully this will give you a little bit of broader vision and impetus and motivation or desire, or, fervor to go into, something that you really think is missing in your practice or the others. So back into the presentation, is we look at these muscles, but not from a neurological aspect. What if the person is incredibly stressed? What if they're incredibly sleepy because of too much narcotics, which happens, right? They don't have the mind-body connection. Or perhaps they're too stressed. They're taking care of their mom, or taking care of their parents, or their life happens. So at this time, I try to see where they are in this moment, this hour that I have them, and try to focus on them and try to integrate how they're feeling, they're perceiving. Are they going to work with me? Because if they don't want to be there, they're not, the success, we're already out the door. So I meet them where they are. Maybe they've had a super bad day. They just came back, got bad news again that their cancer is back, or something personal. And we don't do talk therapy. It's more about, let's move. And there in itself is that playtime of moving and, getting out of their head. getting out of those discursive thoughts and getting back in their body. Once again, the two go hand in hand. There's never can you shut off one or the other. They affect. And so the tight muscles, right? How many of us are like this all the time? Okay, guilty as charged. And you forget, I'm not breathing, right? No wonder my, this hurts or that hurts because I'm like this all day. And again, so talk and doing movements, playful movements, oh my gosh, then we can now work from there. So it is a different way of understanding how to get somebody to get into, I'm talking about the woman with kyphosis and getting into her bodies. And then that positive reinforcement. Oh my gosh, look how great you look, Sharon. And she's like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And then you can ask, so why is it you're like this? What is it? Then we can, get a little bit into why she's doing this so much. Yes, she was a teacher, but guess what? She doesn't feel confident in her life. And so that's where when she says, I'm like this, when she comes out like this, she feels exposed. And then so we're not there to talk psychotherapy. We're like, oh, okay, good to know. So let's do this. Let's see how you feel. Oh, I feel so much better. I feel so much stronger. You look great. So there we can work with those of telling her in a positive way and getting her out of this sensory amnesia, if that helps. We all have some sensory amnesia. It's similar to us going to work every day or going to grandma's house or going to a friend's or going to the grocery store. We go the same way. We forget where we're going at time. We just passed it. It's the same way. It's these, we're mechanistic. We're robots. Our life has just been on this track and we're going to stay there. And hopefully we want to get off track and, play a little bit so that possibly we become whole again in our bodies. So sensory amnesia is huge. And it is the condition of chronically tight muscles that have learned to stay contracted due to repeated and reflexive response, such as stress. And I mean, stress everyday life, but stress in such as your accidents and injuries, surgeries, repetitive tasks, ongoing emotional stress. The stress stays in our connective tissue, period, end of story. And it takes a long time to undo those stresses. We go back to our patterns. We get triggered by our patterns. PTSD, those of us that work in the VA that have been traumatized, you see these muscular contractions, and we, need to protect that. We need to understand that this is a real life issue. So that's one of my big understandings in the back of my head is I have to see I have to meet this person where they are, and then realize that this accident they had, one of my clients was in a ski accident here on the hill and broke their back in 4 different places, shattered, broke her femur, both ankles were broken, nearly died. And she's at 75, she's up in water skiing, slalom to this day. It's crazy. Like if you have the will and the understanding that all of this is combined, it's not just doing one part, and she had several parts to be fixed, but she had to go back and figure out, am I ready to get back in the game at that level? So anyway, I digress. So the resulting patterns of these holding patterns, whether it's shrugging your shoulders or clenching your jaw or twisting or sitting cross-legged really tight, I'm trying to think of the patterns I see more often. Most of it is kyphosis. I would say most of that, a lot of very little extension. I'm trying to think, but I would say kyphosis and just gait issues, a lot of valgus. Anyway, I'm just trying to think of tags I see mostly. But what happens is they come in, my back hurts, my neck hurts, my shoulder hurts, my hip pain, limited mobility. A lot of times they've had no injury. We can't figure out what is going on. And it is maladaptive patterns. They didn't realize. Found out a client was sitting on their, how you sit in a chair and put your leg underneath your tush. She was doing that for 30 years teaching. Her hips are off, they're twisted. She has, the kind of scoliosis, believe it or not. Now she has this nerve pain and neuropathy. So we had to go back in that history. And it happened by, again, unraveling of what have you been doing in the past 30 years? What have you been, going back in history? So doing the histological, having them walk, having them talk, doing movement patterns, meaning on the Pilates, walking, just doing our normal exercises, and then really looking at them in a holistic pattern, asking questions, and then we can address the part approach. If that makes sense. So we kind of understood that from that. I was going to use this as a case study, but you kind of get my my gist of she doesn't have structural kyphosis. It is her mental aspect that she stays in this posture. And when you say stand up straight, it's amazing. She has it. So muscular, skeletal, she's aware, but as soon as she walks out of my studio, she goes into that posture again. And I see it day and day. I see her 5 days a week. And so anyway, we're going to get into it. I haven't cracked her sensory amnesia yet of why she goes back to that. Anyway, so here's where the somatic education and the therapeutic or post-therapeutic intervention is rest with activity. And it never dawned on me. Rest is so important for all of us in the sense of awareness. So we do emotion, and then we need to really think about it. So let's say rotator cuff. I asked somebody, or let's go back to Sharon with the kyphosis. Sharon, can you stand up straight? Okay, I want you to do, you're walking up and down the wall. She can do that. Sharon, go back into your posture. Walk up and down the wall. Oh, she can't do it. That's interesting, right, Sharon? What do you feel? So we do all these motions. And going at, do you feel your serratus? Do you feel your muscles of your back? Do you feel your breathing? Do you feel your core? All these is to bring awareness to her. So we do these patterns slowly, more methodically, for 45 minutes. The next day I see her and she's sore like she's never been sore before. Because those intrinsic muscles, these small little muscles, have not been utilized. So we're working on the global muscles versus the little muscles or the intrinsic. So in order for myself to really heal, for them to heal, for me to help them, in that process, is that mind-body integration. Is they need to perceive, they need to be aware before we do that action and during that action. Okay, we'll talk about embodiment practice a little bit, but it's more for them to embody themselves, right? To kinesthetically be aware of their movements. Okay, and then that natural movement I touched upon a little bit is not so much flexion, extension, horizontal abduction, et cetera, is be playful. Let me see how your body moves. And that is really what's a telltale in somatic and in transpersonal psychotherapy, is to see how that person moves in their natural environment. As they say, dance like somebody's not watching, kind of like that. Okay, so all of this is really about the chain, the wheels of healing. All of us as practitioners, and I mean kinesiologists, physical therapists, occupational speech, we work in this healing, right? We work in that kind of singular modality. But as these wheels spin, or these links spin, is you want to see them develop, right? You want them to become more than just their injured shoulder or their injured knee or their injured back, right? You want to see that wellness transform or to develop into their whole body. Right, we see that the compensatory issues, right? Your PT works on your knee. We work on healing that ACL, MCL, or the broken femur. And then we do as kinesiotherapists, we look at the compensatory issues that they've had to deal with for how many years of having a broken leg or injured knee, right? So that's what we look at, is try to make them symmetrical. And then not only with the symmetry, all of a sudden you're like, wow, my legs are strong, my core is terrible. I am not able to swing a golf club anymore, because I'm not strong in my core and I'm not strong in my arms. And then I'm going to throw out my back. And now I have rotator cuff issues because they weren't ready, right? We've been healing one part, but not the whole. So that's where this cycle of continuous movement, not the SPA, but the continuous movement which is my where I work out of, is the transformation aspect of it. So healing is a part approach, and have them develop into their whole, And then the transformation really is tremendous. I've seen it. Again, another example, the woman that had cancer, breast cancer, and she ended up having dystonia and lymphedema. So she came to me because she just wanted to work out. She just wanted to do Pilates, and then realized, oh my goodness, she couldn't do all four. She couldn't help keep her head up. Her head was, constantly shaking. And over the last 2 years, her lymphedema totally gone. She's able to incredibly do intermediate to advanced exercises. And again, so that development has transformed her into doing other things in her own life. She's doing things that she never thought she would do after breast cancer, and then developing into friendships that are different. And then, so that's it's exciting to see. And that is what's holistic, which I've seen over the last 30 years. That's what I want to become as a practitioner. So take a breath. If there's anybody who wants to chat, there's one little chat. Nope, no chat. Okay.
I have a question. This is Bridget.
Yeah.
How do you document the somatic? Any progress, I guess that would be.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Personally, because I don't take insurance unless it's because I don't have a doctor on site, I get references and I get suggestions to go see me. But because I work in a college, my studio is inside a college. So back to your question, I apologize. My dog is going to start screaming. I'm at home. My documentation hopefully doesn't bark. My documentation is still on the SOAP notes. So I still do SOAP notes. And my documentation is a lot of video, believe it or not. When they first come in and I see something that I've never seen before, I've never had somebody with dystonia, and I work with a great deal of breast cancer patients, and I take pictures of them to see what they look like and their movement patterns. Especially you saw that woman I had on there that is a very typical pattern, that they're not able to even get into that pattern because it has so many neurological components to it, not only muscular and flexibility components. So my documentation is not only my SOAP notes. I don't do necessarily degrees. It's more of a conversation subjective, objective. And then I take videos and photos if they will allow me. They go into their file. And then weeks later, embarrassingly enough, sometimes it can be a year later that we go back to those photos and look at that. And that's what helps. But honestly, in somatics, Bridget, is they have that awareness. They know something has changed. They know something that is transformed. And I hear it all the time is, working on pelvic floor, they can say, oh, well, my partner thinks you. And it's like a little too much information, but that's transformative. It's moved on to another being. It's moved into a different dimension of their life. You've helped me with my grandkids. I can now get onto the floor. I can run with them because I'm not, in this position. Or does that make sense? That it's more of this conversation, how I document it. And my practice is less restrictive because I would say maybe 5% of my clientele I share with either physicians or PTs on a weekly basis. So we exchange SOAP notes and phone calls. But otherwise is that I'm private pay. And so that gives me a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more flexibility. And that may not have answered your question.
No, that's good. Thanks. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So with the Pilates it's a comprehensive. It's not just mat Pilates. It takes years to become a comprehensive Pilates individual. Most practitioners that are comprehensive have our degrees, if not more. Some are doctors, some are physical therapists, some are psychologists, some are PhDs. And there's a reason, because all these different pieces of equipment have utilities. They have specific needs. And if you want to, I can go back to to see what these are, but they're just modalities. I don't say just, but here goes my dog again. My deliveries here. Okay, so Pilates, and I use it as post-therapeutic because I'm not a physical therapist. We can't use therapeutic intervention. So for those of you that know Pilates, what we work on fundamentally is core. And a lot of people think, oh, core. We know what core is, right? It's everything that is attached to, I apologize, everything that's attached, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So it's everything that is attached to our scapula, everything that's attached to our pelvis and our spine. And if you think about it, that's our whole body. But we primarily focus on scapular stabilization, pelvic stabilization, spinal articulation, and breath. Well, holy cow, that's pretty much what we do in life, right? So it's more about working from the biomechanical, neuromuscular, physiology, the anthropometry for sure. That's how we work, in our environment, our culture. But again, we're saying the same things. You're going to see where I'm going with all this. So Pilates and somatics, they don't stand alone. They're not on their own island by any means. Somatics helps with maintain some of the muscle strength, muscle endurance, coordination, balance. So does the Pilates method. I use different language. I use different modalities for the somatic work, different modalities for the Pilates for sure. They both increase kinesthetic awareness. We work, in Pilates, we work with open and closed kinetic chain movement patterns. Mostly somatics is closed chain. And we use different pieces of equipment. As you saw, the reformer, the tower chair, and the Cadillac and the ladder barrel. And we can go through those, later if you want to really choose. Because even if you're not a Pilates instructor, and I guess I shouldn't necessarily say this, you can use some of these pieces of equipment to enhance some of your clients' movement patterns. They facilitate a lot of that. Pilates, just like any type of rehab or movement, we do assisted movement on the machines. We do dynamic stabilization. We do functional re-education. So those, if you are in, post-rehabilitation with me, these are documented of different moves and with assisted, and then we move to dynamic and, revisit the re-education movement patterns. And more than not, I would say 90%, if not more than not, people do not know how to recruit their intrinsic small muscles. They work out of their global muscles. And once we teach them to work on their smaller muscles, identify the pelvic floor, identify the little the multifidi up the back, identify, what that pelvic floor even means. What does it feel like? How does it integrate my core stability? What is my serratus? And, a lot of these clients, they don't want to know the names. I have a client that in Chicago, I used to tell her all the names of everything. And she said, Seth, I just think of all the people in my building. She says, you say serratus, and I think of, Mrs. Malchowicz. And she says, I do trapezius, and I think of, Mrs. Cone up the, so it's kind of funny. They don't really hear, they don't care, a lot of them. So, but I like to teach that way. It's just the way I have always taught. And then we move on, to understanding, the disassociation. Wow, when you do a lunge, it's not the whole body, it's the femur coming out of the pelvis. And oh my gosh, how do I do that? Oh, guess what? It's the pelvic floor and looking at the serratus. And oh my gosh, look at that kyphosis. You're not able to stand up straight. So if you see how this is all moving to, it's all integrating, it's all weaving in and out. We're not standing on a different island when I teach somatics or just regular, using a dumbbell. It's all of these principles. It's just a matter of the modalities and how we piece them together. And obviously we work on the connective nervous tissue skeletal in our practices. This is nothing new to, I'm sure, a lot of you. So here, who is this? What is this? Well, so as Bridget and Kathy wanted me to speak upon my practice, I had to go through this. And corrective therapy, right? That's what it was called initially. Well, guess what Pilates was called? Corrective therapy. Believe it or not, in World War II. So going back to kinesiotherapy, we are integrated. And what is the biggest aspect of it? It's the sociological and psychological element. And this is where I find this fascinating, that I literally came upon it in a library, that's how I got my master's degree. It truly was something that came out of nowhere that I got into this, because I was working in just this one area. It's one dimension. We're working in the motor, aspect of healing. And we didn't really pay attention to the psychological, sociological, because we didn't think we had the expertise. I disagree in that sense, that we're all humans, right? And so the dimensions of wellness as a kinesiotherapist, we know these, right? We work in the motor, we work in the exercise, we work in the ambulation, we work in activities of daily living, we work in prosthetics or prosthesis, orthotics, psychological, maybe some of you do, and the sociological, maybe some of you do. I find the sociological aspect very, very intriguing, because we come from different cultures, we come from different backgrounds. My apologies. And if we work with the same sociological groups, we find that we get stuck. And that's what I've found, in my practice. We'll go back to transpersonal. We get stuck in our same ways, right? So when I was working with the US ski team, I was working with that same mindset. And then you threw in somebody that came from a different injury, different background, and it was not the same. I was not being able to work with them in the same I can't even think of the word, not in the same fashion. And bringing this to the fashion is, and this is non-scientific. This is what I threw up just in my own very unscientific way of dealing with with all my clients, is of all the dynamics, of all the dimensions. So if I just do Pilates, I'm missing a great deal of these dimensions. If I just do the somatics, I'm missing some of these dimensions. But, as a kinesiotherapist, I hit them all, every single one of them. And I think as kinesiotherapists, we have the tools. Maybe we forgot about those tools. Maybe they're rusty, but to pull them out, lay them on the counter, kind of think, oh my gosh, I have these. How do I develop one, more than the other? What is my client missing that I, take one client and, think, how do I service them? It's the client's needs. It's right. They always say we go to the store, the customer's always right. The patient, they think they're right, or some of mine do. But it's for us to really serve. We're in the service industry to service them, for them to become whole, to become well beings. And that's a loaded term, and it's a transpersonal psychotherapy term. It's terms that we've used a lot in the mind-body world. But it truly means is we want to become one whole well-being, rather than, which I'll show you here, this integration is somebody that is more diseased. So the integration, that's what it's about, integrating all our knowledges, and not just education. You don't need a degree to have knowledge. Some of you have amazing knowledge from what you've done in your social times, maybe in your playtime, your hobby time. Maybe, you've taken up a PhD, not quote PhD, but in terms of time, use that and see if, that would help in that, the humanistic part of our healing of the bodies. So, it's Wikipedia, it's Webster, wherever I got this from, I forget, but the integration, right, to form, to coordinate, or blend into functioning or unified whole is, wholeness is something we don't want to be half, right? So I look at this when I look at my clients when they walk in the door is, am I going to be that practitioner today to look at the whole person eventually? Do I want them to be well-being, to be able to walk out of here and be able to ride their bikes or swim or ski or garden, or by all means just to walk, right? A couple of high functioning quads. That's all I want for them, and to become well. And sometimes they know they're not going to walk. One of my clients said to me just last week, he said, if I never walk, I don't mind, but please, I need something to do with my hands. I'm a carpenter. And so that, was something to me that thought, you know what, this is why I'm here. It brings me full circle, is to say, okay, let's work on that. Let's try to work on your breathing, become, more ambulatory, maybe with your hands. Let's, see where we can move from that. So it's being aware of the holism and the well-being of the individual and trying to move away from this dis-ease. And that's where that disconnection is from that mind and body, is they are never separate. So if you have somebody that comes in is just negative, that it's going to affect them. The neurosynapses are there. They are not going to heal like they should. So if we can help them be in that positive approach, I think that helps tremendously. And again, is bring them awareness to myself, awareness to them. As you well know, sometimes somebody comes in and I'm just too happy-go-lucky and I need to bring it down a notch because it's too high for them to come to meet me. So it's awareness on both. And the healing is more of what we work in. It's all those dimensions, right? Of orthopedic, motor, education, or exercise, ADLs, prosthetic, on and on and on. So that's what we deal with, is the healing. And then it's up to us if we want is to move them into that development and transformation. So really in my body centric that's where I came up with it. It was truly that I like bodies and I want the body, mind, body to be centric to my world. And that's really how this all came about. And that's where I became successful as a kinesiotherapist and looking outside the box, but it didn't happen in a box. I had moved all over the world and had to recreate myself. And then again, working in an indigenous Spanish culture that I didn't know that. And so when I came to them and nobody was speaking English and I had to learn a little bit to figure out how to get them well, that was different. I wasn't teaching them what I had learned. They're teaching me, and how do we meet how do the roads meet? Then I lived in France for so many years. I was not going to teach them what I learned by any means. So I learned that practice. Then I moved from the south of the United States, from Colorado. Then I moved to Chicago. Now I live in rural Maryland. That was a change, probably the biggest change of any place I've ever been. So that's where I was saying, from the sociological aspect, is you're going to meet different people, different practices, different cultures, that the norms don't necessarily work, even from a dialogue, a semantics, a movement, a touch. I'm very tactile with my patients. Well, with the religion and with these individuals, that was not going to fly. Speaking of which, how about COVID? That changed my practice, right? So how do I, be tactile? You can't when there's COVID and somebody, right? So I've had to be a lot more animated and creative, which is another thing that has come up about motion guidance. I don't know if any of you have been privy to motion guidance, but essentially it's reinforcement of your clients' neuromuscular patterns. Basically, it's a headlamp that can be put on any aspect of your body, and you have this big chart. So let's just use the lady with the kyphosis. I strap it to her chest, and she has the light on her chest right at her sternum, and she has to be able to bring the light up onto the chart by herself without any auditory reinforcement. So that taught me, during COVID, I can't touch her, and I can stand 6 feet, 10 feet away, and she's able to do these movement patterns. So again, I'm always learning, the client's always transforming me. And I think that's what's exciting about what we do as kinesiotherapists, is we're not stuck in a box, right? So that is what I do from little practice in Western Maryland. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, or you can email me, or Text me if you don't want to do it now, or even later or anytime. And I will then turn it over to Kathy or Bridget.
I have a million questions. I get to talk to you more often, so I'll leave it to everybody else. So knowing, at the end, you kind of talked about, kinesiotherapists kind of have all of these things that they can use. Some of them may be rusty because they're just in one wing versus the other. So knowing that, where do you think kinesiotherapists would fit best in the private sector, and where do you see the profession where it could go?
I thought about it. I would love to see more kinesiotherapists in private practice. I've noticed just in my line of work, being with a college has been tremendous, because you get to work with a multi-targeted group. You have students, it's a wellness center, it's a senior center as well. So I see them, in the private practice a lot more. The VA system, and I don't know it because I've not worked in it since 1991, but it's similar to our hospitals. We're pigeonholed, right? So I understand it's scary, but find out something that you like. I liked sports, in the sports medicine. So that's the avenue I went. And I'm going to tell you, I was ignored. What is a kinesiotherapist? You have to do your elevator speech 9 billion times. Well, why are you different than a physical therapist? We've heard all the negative. So I just turn around and I say, this is my expertise. This is what I know. And I'm a kinesiotherapist. Boom. And then all of a sudden, it led me into something else. So it takes, I think, find what you really are passionate about in the sector that you want to work with. And I think that lends you to transform your own, you look outside your box and it becomes exciting. And trust me, it was never, I just liked what I did. And, monetary was not successful to me by any means for a very, very long time. And I just kept growing. My family and my husband would say, not another certification, not another degree, please. That's just what I do. I love to learn. Just like I said, I learned about this movement guidance movement. I just learned about it, meaning a month ago. And I thought, this is fascinating. And I can use it on all forms of equipment, right? But I'm still the kinesiotherapist. It says over my door, kinesiotherapy. It doesn't say Pilates, right? It says wellness kinesiotherapy. And so people don't really look at the kinesiotherapy, but now people are coming to me and it's kinesiotherapy. I want to keep it alive as much as we can, but it's not just that. I think that we all have to come together and say, we are holistic in nature, right? We don't do those part approaches. We're not a physical therapist, not occupational, not speech. What my presentation was more today is to see that we all intertwine. We cannot be islands. And I will say that I've been most successful with where I've been in, all my areas have been with, I've not been standalone. I've been with people underneath the same roof has been the most successful, because you talk with other people. I have a somatic practitioner down the hall from me, and we essentially do the same exact thing, but we talk with one another. And I basically said, you have a certification in it. I have a master's degree, and go for it. He has a isolated form of somatics. Mine's more integrated into a larger whole. So that is where, I jumped all over. Trying to figure, I'm an aquatic specialist, but a rehab or a kinesiotherapist in the water. I was a kinesiotherapist at the ski team. I was a kinesiotherapist doing Pilates modalities. And like for me, it had to be integrative. And I know that didn't answer your question, but I would suggest where I see healthcare is going is we are looking at the sociological and the psychological dimensions to be enormous. That's where I see it. And I think COVID's hit it a lot. I see it in, my continuing education. I see it in periodicals. I see it in our studies. That's where we're getting hit the hardest.
What's
And
something thank you. What's something that you do, or what would be your first go-to if there's a client or a patient who's just not getting that breakthrough, or if you are even stuck? Like, what is your first go-to for that?
For me, it's different. I will go to a client. It just happened maybe 3 weeks ago. I had a client coming into me, and she thought it was her neck, thought it was weak core. And she laid down, and I won't go through the whole hour, but she enormously weak, that of a 95-year-old. She was 28, and she said, I can't do it. I'm dizzy. She could barely sit up. We started realizing that she was not breathing at all. Like, it was short breaths. Then it came to be that she had extreme anxiety, extreme debilitating anxiety. That was shutting off every oxygenation, somatic fluid, cerebral fluid, was not functioning. So we did some breath work. We did some movement patterns, very light. Again, towards that development, toward more of that, my private practice of being the transpersonal psychotherapist. And then I had to send her off to another practitioner, just to make sure. Moving back, it starts that she can't do it. It was so extreme. Somebody had told her way down the path of her history. She was, this, and this, couldn't do it. And it has morphed into herself being insular and not able to move. And she has now debilitating physical problems because of it. And so for me, I'm working on the physical, and she's realizing that she just goes into her head. So it's that monkey mind. So it's just that discursive. I can't. I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm this, I'm this. Instead of going, wow, just these little movements. Holy cow, I felt a whole lot different. And that's one example. She was more open to it. Let me give you another example. Somebody that I know just is not getting healing and not been with me almost 7 years. You peel away the onion. It's little things at a time. And I think it's just trying to show patterns of movement that make them feel good, right? It's that serotonin, right? You want to hit that happy place, if that helps in some ways.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me. Somebody that wants to work hard, just like she comes into Pilates and wants to kill herself. And we do it. And then she does one exercise and collapses on the floor, starts crying uncontrollably, and leaves the room. We hit something that, in that pelvic region, that it woke up, and she did not like it and felt it was not comfortable. And so she's like, I don't want to do that ever again. So again, she's not coming for therapy. We're there to, get her strong. And little by little, we're going to start to realize that. And it's amazing. I've had a client that has been stuck in her core. She feels like there's a big hole that she literally cannot do a sit-up. And she knows the body. She's a craniosacral therapist. She's on ski patrol with me. So she's no dummy to the body. And she just realized that she shut off her body at one time during a traumatic pregnancy. And then, so, literally her legs they would go out from underneath her because her pelvic floor was that unaware. She was unaware of it. So, it's fascinating to me. So little things, again, using my modalities and the springs and the straps of the reformers help to put her, in positions. The somatics of movement and breathing, they all interrelate. So it's truly fascinating. And again, I didn't make up this model. It kind of came to me, by piecemeal, but I realized I have the tools now, and I can hang up my RKT hat underneath all of the other dimensions. And I think that should be with everybody. Everybody here is not just a kinesiotherapist. Even, you're an athlete or not athlete, you're an artist, you're a gardener, you're a carpenter. I really believe that you have skill sets that can be a part of what we do. I really do believe that.
I love that. I think that's brilliant. Well, I don't want to take any more time, although we could ask you clients forever. There's one question.
I'm good. My dog's not happy. I locked him outside.
One question. Are most of your clients those who haven't been successful with traditional therapies?
Almost all of them. And not to be pejorative, but I would say yes. And it's come, what I hear from most of my clients, not most of them, all of them that have come to me from a previous PT or OT, they say, I benefit with you faster and grossly more than I do with PT. And I don't think it's the individual. I know it's not the individual because she's my friend. She has become my friend and she's an amazing physical therapist. Healthcare's changed. They don't have the time. They literally do the 15-minute part approach, give you a 25-page, do these exercises, come back. And that's a part approach. It's not helping the person heal. And so a lot of it's private pay, and my rates are commiserate with out-of-pocket pay is, maybe a little bit more, and still that's expensive for people that don't have insurance. So I understand it's not idyllic. I try to do super bills, I'm talking on the healthcare side of things. But it's a problem, and I'm sad that RQTs, that we lost our ability to do tertiary pay. That in the 90s, that was a bit, or right, was it in the 90s? I forget now. So that was a real big blow. And I think that's when I started ramping up that I've got to figure out how people will come to me and do private pay, because maybe it's in the 2000s anyway. I realized that if you hang up your profession, people are going to come to you. And I've noticed that we're in that realm of self-care, and people will pay. I know people that are on a sliding scale of their insurance or their retirement, that were teachers way back when. So they're not making big payments, and they see me 3 days a week. And I have classes, so they only pay $15 an hour, but it's a class. So it allows them to have that. And I'm in a very rural, poor area, so it's taught me to fill the airplane seats. It's do a different business model. I can't charge what I was in Connecticut. There's no way I would not have a business. So it's meeting those people where they are, and they're farmers and they're agricultural, and they are teachers, they're coal miners. They're not there in the Pilates studio, right? So it is truly meeting them where they are and realizing that, okay, can you pay $5? Come to this class. And I throw him to the Somatic class where he has 30 people for $5. So it's attainable. It's just you have to think outside the box. Not everybody can pay the rack rates, right, of private pay. So that's what's helped me to be kind of a leader in the community. And sure, it's still, I'm not a licensed physical therapist, so you better go to them first before you go to Seth, which I don't mind, right? So I get the soap notes, I get their MRIs, I get to see the, what's really wrong, because I cannot diagnose. And so that's, I want to have that working relationship and that open door, but it takes time. You need to show, your stuff, right? Because I don't know how many years, if not decades, I was just a glamorified personal trainer, and it takes some thick skin, but if you know your practice and you see the clients doing that, and that's why I came with this transformation. It's a whole 16-week course, is that there is that healing and development and transformation in their lives. It really does make a difference.
Any other questions, either yourself or in the chat?
Oh my goodness, I see all these chats. I'm sorry, I had I think it's really good. But all right, thanks you guys. Are most of your clients who have not been successful with their, oh, she did, okay. Yes, I said that, okay. Information putting all the elements together, they're all important. We're glad to see that, it's glad to see it stressing the importance of all and nothing. Okay. Okay, good. So, yeah, no questions, just.
I have one more.
Yeah,
Are there
yeah, go ahead.
a couple certifications or classes that you've taken that you would really encourage KTs to look into, something that have really made a difference in your practice?
I believe in somatics. I really do. Hannah Somatics is terrific. You don't need to go get, a master's degree. I would suggest it's probably cheaper, and you're going to get just as much out of it, if not more, going through this Hannah Somatics. Hannah is the man that really brought it to the surface. Any type of, I believe in Dennison, Hannah's wife, Dr. Dennison, his wife. I met them in Chicago. They do, they work with a lot of dyslexic and on the spectrum disorders, but it is the connection of mind, body. And I think they put on seminars, anything that is wellness. Dr. Wheel out of Boston, anything that brings us into the psychological realm and the sociological realm. And I'm not part of it. I will probably go more into the sociological aspects, the cultural, the diversity, the inclusion, how we do different therapies for different areas of the country, different sectors, different cultures, different races, different genders. I truly believe that is something that we're seeing, and I'm where we all get stuck in where we are. This has been the most dramatic, culturally diverse area, socioeconomic diverse area that I think I've ever lived. And they get slighted, of healthcare, right? And they somebody fell off their four-wheeler and now he's quadriplegic, so why isn't he? We have the only pool in the county, which is enormous. I'm an hour and a half away from a major city, so we don't have the modalities here at all. So you go to physical therapists, there's not one pool, believe it or not, to do water polo except for Ryan. But because the physical therapists don't want to give up their autonomy, they're unwilling to send it to me, just up until probably 4 years ago. So it's that constant, engagement and talking to the client and asking him, would you promote this for me, without saying, would you promote this? And when they have the results, then that's where I begin to see the transformation for everybody. Is they healed, they got something out of it. Does that make sense? It's a need satisfaction sales, but going through the back door, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's constantly, it's not easy. You don't get your KT license and go out and start, developing a huge practice. Get it? It's never happened. It's unfortunate, but I truly believe that we can all work together and make, it better, but we've got to be out there. And it's unfortunately, life's busy. It's hard to get out there. I think we were more out there when I was lecturing, and I was with AEA and Ruth Sova and Ruth Myers. She's at KT. So, we were together. We were there, making or doing presentations on behalf of KT and working with MedFit and working with others. And I don't know how it got lost. Honestly, I don't know how I think it just got too fractioned, to be honest with you. So I wish I could have the magic words to say what can we do to be better. But I think the psych aspect is big because no other facet has it, no other dimension, and healthcare has that in what we do in the therapy side.
Well, and hearing that so many of your clients come to you because they've not found success anywhere else, because no one else, goes to that sociological,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's and goes on the other side. They go in for cognitive therapy, and they're missing the body integration, right? So they think they have it all figured out dicursively, but it's still sitting in the cellular aspect of our bodies. And so that's what embody means, or emotions, is to emote, to get it out and to move it. We're kinetic beings. So to move and to be and to do the sensations is tremendously healing, and it's transformational. And it's difficult. It takes, as I say, it's the work, and it's hard to do one-on-one. I mean, one session. And it's a little woo-woo-y when you start to talk to Betty, but or at least I know, when they're ready to hear, then I jump in. I'm like, I got them. But if I know somebody's guarded, like one of my clients, there's no way I'm going to get in there real fast. But I'm working on her, to try to figure out, like, this is what it is. And breast cancer, right? You lop off one of the breasts, that's going to change your posture. You're going to all of a sudden get too much augmentation. That's going to change your outlook. I mean, it's unbelievable what happens when certain things happen with your body. I mean, it goes to your psyche, and then it goes back in. So it's a constant feedback loop, right? And we walk around most of the time, guilty as included. We, run too fast, walk too fast, do things too fast, and without mindfulness. It's easy to say, but, it's kind of, as Dave Matthews said, it's a mat that sits on your doorway, right? And you're like, I'm just going to walk over it again, So it's easier said than done, but I do try in my practice. I'm more mindful with my clients than anything, because I've finally seen the transformation with them. And yeah, it's built my practice. So selfishly, sure, there's that pat on the back too, right? Because if you're not getting the pat on the back, then you just kind of go, ho hum again, right?
Well, I'm glad that you found what works for you and for your clients, and that you're able to share some of that with us. So thank you for your time and
Absolutely.
your incredible outlook. And I find you incredibly fascinating in all the things that you do. And so I'm just really grateful for this.
No, well, I'm grateful for Katie. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't for Bridget, and I've been talking since 1989, Bridget.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. Well, let me know if I can help anymore, and I'll share feedbacks what I've gotten on the chat. You can see them too, Kathy, correct?
Yes.
Okay, then you're good. All right.
Awesome.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Okay, bye. I'll be I can join you next Wednesday. I'm done with ski patrol.
Awesome.
Yeah.